I've always said the beauty of Arkansas can be found not only above ground, but underneath as well. Exploring the subterranean wonder is something to behold indeed. It truly is like visiting another planet without leaving Earth. And throughout the years, we've been on virtually every wild cave excursion offered around the state. Unfortunately, right now, many of the caves remain closed due to the white-nosed bat syndrome, at least until 2019. But in this special edition of EA, we're able to take you to some of our favorites as we go and explore the underground world of the natural state. Beauty Cave gets its name from the grandeur of the huge entrance room, which was discovered in the 1920s.
Mid to late 20s it was discovered, and supposedly by an old man in his 80s.
In his 80s?
In his 80s. Can you imagine walking around these hills looking for a cave in your 80s? But they didn't have Social Security, I guess.
Tell us about the later than exploration of it, and the miles and miles of passageways.
Well, after they discovered the cave, sometime later, some people went further back in the cave, probably in the 1930s, and discovered that they could go in this entrance and come out another entrance on the other side of the mountain, so to speak, that they knew as Bat Cave. So that became a real popular trip through well, it's still a very popular trip today. The National Park Service manages the entire cave system, and we have the Bat Cave entrance closed and about a mile of passage closed for 9 months out of the year because it's an endangered bat hibernaculum. But in May 15th to August 15th each year we have that open. And then in the 1950s, Jim Skirmerhorn and some others discovered that there was a whole bunch more of the cave back to the east of that loop that wasn't really known very well. There had been people back there as early as the 1930s, but he really opened up the cave in that direction, and most of the cave was discovered by Jim or contemporaneous explorers with Jim.
Which all led to the discovery of the Tanuri Room in the early 60s.
I'm very fortunate to have a very great friend. His name is Jack Hershen, and in fact his entire family. And Jack and Dave Smith and Roy Davis were helping Jim Skirmerhorn explore this cave, and they were at a plateau called the Roundhouse, and they were eating lunch, and one of them said, "Wonder where that goes." And so they all three took off going down that passage, some crawling and some climbing down and up and a little more crawling, and then all of a sudden it opens up into a huge room with some fantastic formations, and they sat there in awe of this giant room in this beautiful cave. And they were trying to come up with some name for it. And they realized that they each represented two different states, Tennessee and Missouri. So they chopped the Tennessee and Missouri in half and came up with Tanuri. And then with carbide lights, they used the soot from those lights to write the Tanuri name and their names and the date on a huge rock inside the Tanuri Room. And that's how Tanuri Room came about. That's how it got its name. And even to this day, they think it's so unique of a landmark that the National Park has left that, we would call that graffiti today, but back then it was actually pretty common. And they actually did it in very nice artwork, and so it's an interesting story how Jack, Dave, and Roy discovered the Tanuri Passage and the Tanuri Room, and then named it after Tennessee and Missouri.
Mike, tell us about your adventure in caves. Now, people, they're used to seeing you on the river as an outfitter. Tell us about what the rush that you get of coming into a place like this.
You know, the general public just doesn't really understand that this is a wilderness area. So many places in a giant cave like this where no step footprint has ever been. And yeah, we got the main trails and stuff like that, but it's just literally an underground wilderness area. And so for me, I've actually been caving quite a bit. I'm certainly not the authority that Chuck is, but I've been in a lot of caves in Arkansas and have tried to learn and respect those caves and understand the environment within the cave and the creatures within the cave. And it's a completely different world down here. And it's, as you can see, it's absolutely beautiful. It's gorgeous. And so what's not to like about this? There's no other people here. We're all alone. It's just a wonderful way to spend the day. It's great with kids because if you can teach them not to touch things and then enjoy the sheer beauty of the sight alone, it really has some great rewards to it.
Besides the fact that it's a constant, what, 57, 58 degrees?
Oh yeah, it's in the summertime it's cool, in the wintertime it's so warm, and so it's always fun being in a cave. I mean, I'm in a short sleeve shirt. Here it is, you know, 57 or 8 degrees, but you're constantly moving, so you don't feel that cold, and so it's a great exercise. It's just a wonderful place to spend some time, particularly in my opinion, with knowledgeable people and with family.
There are some 14 miles of mapped passageways in Beauty Cave. Starfish fossils can be found here, evidence that all of this was once part of a shallow sea some 360 to 400 million years ago.
So all these columns here formed from a crack in the ceiling. Water came in, calcium carbonate precipitates out, made these columns. You got to watch your step up here because there's lots of pools.
These columns are just awesome. I mean,
oh, they are incredible. Watch your step here. There might be some salamanders.
And sure enough, we did come upon a salamander.
These guys start out in life with eyes, and as they mature, they lose their eyesight and their pigment, and they have to live in a cave. When they're juveniles, they'll have gills. I don't see gills on this one, and as they reach maturity, they lose their gills, and they have lungs in, I guess. They live out on the surface, lay eggs and feed in these pools.
Now, there are a lot of sections like this that you want us to go through, huh, Chuck?
There are a lot. There are a lot of stretches like hands and knees crawls like this, but none with this signature groove or ridge down the middle.
Caving really is like going to another planet without leaving Earth.
As soon as you enter that portal, you leave one world behind and enter a different world, although they're connected. You can see things that, you may see things that no human has ever seen, which is very exciting. Or you may see where people have been living in a cave, you know, 10,000 years ago or something, 8,000 years ago, which can be pretty exciting too. You may see an organism that's never been described by science, or sometimes it's just the beauty of the whole thing. It's just a very beautiful place to be. I personally like the darkness and the quietness of the place. It's no place else in the whole outside world that I know of that you can go and be in just absolute darkness, not see an airplane fly over or a satellite go over in the night sky. It's just pure black and dark and sometimes nearly purely quiet. And I appreciate that.
It is like being on some alien world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, I can't remember the fellow's name, but somebody said this is, going caving is the one place left where a person of modest means can discover new worlds.
With a spectacular natural entrance, War Eagle Cavern, east of Rogers, has been the amazement and wonder of people throughout the ages, from Native Americans on. Now, you can take the regular commercial tour here, or, depending on how adventuresome you are, the wild cave excursion, which is what we're going to do today. So sit back, relax, and let us do the crawling for you. War Eagle Cavern is located on the shores of Beaver Lake off Highway 12 east of Rogers. Teaming up with Dennis Boyd and Jim Madison of War Eagle Cavern, we began our wild cave trek where the public tour leaves off, crawling through a 3-foot-high, 85-foot-long tunnel. But the fun was just starting.
We having fun yet, Michad?
Used by Native Americans hundreds of years before the first settlers came to this area, War Eagle Cavern was once known as Bat Cave. It is still home to one of North America's largest colonies of pipistrelle and gray bats. In fact, at any given time, there may be as many as 75,000 bats in the cave, and your chances of coming up upon huge colonies of bats like we did are quite good. Because the gray bats use the cave as a maternity roost during the spring months, wild cave tours are conducted only from July through October. As far as caves go, War Eagle Cavern isn't as old as most caves, only about 250 million years.
Well, this cave is actually a much younger cave than a lot of caves, and we're a very horizontal cave, meaning this is a river that we've been following going back underground. And up to just a short time ago, about 500,000 years ago, this was a massive river from ceiling to floor. But as that river finally receded from there, then things would start growing. And 500,000 years is not enough time to get all of these really growing on there. So you got to come back here, Chuck, in about another 500,000 years, and we should see a lot more stalactites by that time on there. We are going to encounter some further back into the cave on there. Right now, this is home to bats, and as you've probably been able to see, we've got some bats hanging out on our ceiling. They're getting ready to go into hibernation here. They're the little brown bat, the little eastern pipistrelle that we're seeing today.
They're not the endangered kind.
No, sir. Now, all bats are protected. We do have some gray bats that are a little rarer, and they really hide from us a lot. They're a little more endangered on there.
I guess the ones with the long ears are the more, the species that are endangered.
Yes, sir. There's actually over 1,000 different kinds of bats in the world on there. We have about 2 that make their home in the cave, and probably another 4 or 5 different species that like to hang out here in the summertime.
And you mentioned to us before the reason why they hang upside down.
Well, the reason a bat hangs upside down, I don't know if we can spot any here, they're a little distance away on there, but you always see a bat hanging upside down for one very important reason. It's the only way he can fly. He's got very short little legs, big long wings, very disproportionate to his body. So to fly, he actually will let go, flip over, glide, and then fly. And when he lands, he's got to flip back upside down, grab a hold of a ceiling. If a bat's down on the ground, he's in real trouble down there.
We talked about the bat guano here, and that's still used today.
Oh, absolutely. We have piles of bat guano We have nearly 100,000 bats that use this cave throughout the year, and they do leave quite a mess behind. Bat guano, of course, is nothing more than bat poop or bat fertilizer on there, used primarily today for fertilizer, but in the past it's been used to make gunpowder, clear back to the time of the Civil War, still use some today. And the thing that ladies always like to hear, it is a key ingredient as a base to make eye mascara with.
I don't know if they're going to put any on after this, though.
We have a lot of ladies swear off of mascara when they hear that.
Along this wild cave route, you'll come upon a 30-foot tall narrow room where water droplets eventually make their way down to the cave floor. Watching them as they free fall is in itself quite fascinating. You may want to challenge yourself by trying to catch one or two of the droplets with your mouth.
How does it taste?
Oh, it tastes good.
This 2-hour wild cave tour at War Eagle Cavern is by reservation only, and you must be at least 4 feet tall. A long-sleeve shirt is recommended to avoid scrapes, as well as long pants, no shorts. Gloves, knee pads, and a helmet would also be wise, along with at least 3 sources of light for backup. Also, bring a change of clothes because you will get wet and muddy. But all in all, it is a lot of fun, and you just may want to come back again and again and again to explore the inner depths of War Eagle Cavern. Like most caves, Cosmic Cavern north of Berryville also has its unique formations, but unlike other caves, this cavern also has 2 small underground lakes, the bottoms of which have yet to be discovered. And if you're really adventuresome, there's also a wild cave route. So let us take you on yet still another Ozark underground wonder. The first few feet of this wild cave tour are the trickiest. Of course, what our viewers didn't see was we almost lost a videographer. Meshad Holiday went ahead of us so we could get this shot of us going across. Just almost lost him down in that lake. He made it.
The cave was found in 1845 by a lead prospector, which would be about 1,000 feet behind me. We're about 1,000 feet into the cave here. The cave wasn't opened commercially as a show cave till 1927, which is about the time a lot of the show caves opened up. Motels, Route 66 is in the area. A lot of places started, people started going across country and they want to see the natures and wonders of nature. When they got back in the Ozarks, there's quite a few caves, and by that time there were probably 20 or 30 mom and pop caves. This was one of them, and it was closed during World War II, reopened in 1952. And I came here when it was changed from Mystery Cave to Cosmic Cavern in 1972, and I've been here ever since. The tour has, let's see, the 3 times we've added on to the tour route since I've been here, and we've added from what was about probably a 700 or 800 foot tour is now 1/3 of a mile all the way through the trip.
The underground lakes are what make this cavern so interesting.
According to the geologists, we're situated in the Cotter Dolomite, and there's a large crack in the ceiling all the way through the cave. 90% of the cave follows this fault line, and a fault can run very deep, and this fault has broke into an aquifer called the Rubidou. The Rubidou aquifer feeds Roaring River, Blue Spring, several places in this area, and it never drops below a certain point, so we always have a lot of water. We've got 3 places in the cave that has a constant water level, never goes below that point. It's been up many times up over the sidewalk since I've been here, but it never drops below a certain point, and it just keeps feeding on back further in the mountain.
Since the cave's discovery, the bottoms of the lakes have not been found.
Nobody can reach the bottom because man's technology hasn't gone that far yet. We can't figure out how to fit through some of these places. Everybody has ideas. Why don't you train the fish? We have trout in here that we could put lights on and maybe let them go back and have a camera tied to them. We have some really wild analogies about how to get back in the cave, but we never will find a true bottom or a true end because a fault line of this extent can run between 5,000 and 10,000 feet in the ground, which may not be very wide, but it's still there, and that still doesn't take much of a crack in the ground to bring water up. If you've ever had a broken water pipe, it doesn't take much of a crack to cause the water to flood the house.
Divers have explored the lakes but haven't been too successful.
We've had 3 sets of divers, and one diver that in the second lake back here, when they dove to make an IMAX movie that's shown in Branson now, he was able to squeeze through a small crevice and touch the ceiling of a big underwater room and have a 2 million candle power light that he could see the room, but he couldn't fit through it. And the walls were so sharp and were covered in flint, he couldn't squeeze in there. And that is the next possibility as far as going underwater. And a huge underwater room they've seen but can't get to it.
Cosmic Cavern is home to the rare Ozarks blind cave salamander and 2 particular barrels.
I brought an old man in the cave in 1986 that all the way through the cave he's bragging about when he was a kid they came in here and had some boats they made out of old barrels. And of course the easiest way to make a boat in the cave is roll 4 barrels together and tie them together. They did that with oak poles, and when they had done exploring the cave they apparently left them back here and they sank. Well, this guy is all the way through the cave. He's telling me, I got an old barrel boat he's telling me about. And I showed him the old barrels that when the water's low on the tour, you can see them. And he said, yep, that's our boat. And it was down here in 1911 when I was down here with it. And he was about 11 years old. To this day, we haven't had any eyewitnesses that can go back that far because not many people come in 100 years later and tell you stories. I've been here long enough. After 35 years, I've heard lots of stories from a lot of old timers that have long since passed away. And we have documented quite a bit of it.
Randy began offering the thrill of wild caving to visitors back during the early 1990s.
In 1993, January 23rd, we found a whole new section of cave that goes back almost a quarter of a mile. And the little bitty crawlway we had to squeeze through was just like a small augured out tunnel that we had blasted 2 small charges of dynamite. We explored it thoroughly for probably about a month and a half, and within a year's time we had a walkway part of the way back. Between that and that first year, from 93 to 94, we started showing about 200 people this back part of the cave for I think $35. And you get nasty, you get muddy, you got lakes you had to go across. We had a rubber raft that never could hold air, which made it much more interesting and colder of a route. And so in 94 we had this section back to where I'm standing added on, and we still took a boat and still went back further in the cave. We were the first show cave in the Ozarks to add on a wild tour. Everybody later started doing it and kind of followed my example. But now we have a little deck and it's a little easier to get back in there. We still spend about 2 to 2.5 hours. We don't take any more than 6 people or less than 2, and depends on the cameras. I have people that can run in and out of here in an hour and a half. I haven't ever taken a tour faster than that, but there's so much to see. There's 800 feet of cave back here that we show, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's not the quantity, it's the quality. Beautiful back here.
There's one particular cave straw formation in this cavern that is quite unique.
The 9-foot soda straw is, out of 8,000 known caves in the Ozarks, we have the longest known straw that doesn't touch from the ceiling to the floor all the way. It's got about a 2.5-foot gap, and the ceiling provided the water, and the floor was 12.5 feet lower, and the water all built up the soda straw from the ceiling to the floor, and now it's freestanding after the top 2.5 feet of it fell. After checking around, though, we found that that is the longest known soda straw stalagmite, or we call it a straw mite, known to exist in the 8,000 plus known caves in Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. It's the weight of it, it's top heavy. It shows us that the water flooding hasn't caused any damage to it, and it also shows us that nothing has moved down here. If anything would have moved just the slightest little bit, the wrong drip of water, that would not be standing the way it is.
It looks like it's just defying gravity. It shouldn't stand there like that, like it is. It's just...
And it's hollow inside. It's got only half the density of what a icicle would have. So a hard breath, a good sneeze, and it could be gone.
Randy says there's even more cave to Cosmic Cavern.
Now they've squeezed through a little small, foot-tall passageway and are able to stand up, and it's 15 feet high, and it still goes, and we're still following airflow. Airflow is like a neon arrow. It will show whether the cave goes or not, and there is a wind back there. We are 425 feet under a ridge that goes back 8 miles. We don't think we'll ever find all of this place.
So if you're thinking of possibly getting into wild caving, we highly recommend joining one of the many grotto clubs around the state. Never, ever try to go out and venture it alone. And for more on wild caving, plus many of our other topics and destinations, visit our website at aetn.org/exploringarkansas. And we'll see you again the next time for another exciting adventure on Exploring Arkansas.